We take the raw lead of everyday life and turn it into the cinematic gold of storytelling excellence. Experience the magic of narrative alchemy as we transform pain into power and loss into legacy. Subscribe today and witness the transformation in every new video.
On a Tuesday afternoon in March, my daughter called me crying so hard she could barely get the words out. My grandson was sick. Cancer, she said. Leukemia. The specialist didn't take insurance, and if I didn't wire $95,000 by Friday, they'd lose the surgical window. I told her I'd have the money in her account before noon. I wired every penny, and I felt, in that moment, like I had done the only thing a grandmother could do. What my daughter didn't know was that I spent 18 years investigating exactly this kind of scheme. My name is Thelma Briscoe. I'm 64 years old, a widow of 2 years, and I live alone in the house my late husband Vernon built for us in Decatur, Georgia. 3 bedrooms, a garden Vernon loved more than television, and a filing cabinet in the back room that most people would take for old tax records. It isn't old tax records. When people look at me, they see what I've always let them see. A retired school nurse, quiet, a little slower since Vernon passed, tends her roses, goes to Wednesday Bible study, probably lonely. Harmless. The kind of woman you don't worry about because she doesn't seem to worry about herself. What they don't see is that before I became a school nurse, I spent 18 years as a senior fraud investigator for Meridian Insurance Group in Atlanta. I built federal cases against people who faked accidents, staged medical crises, manufactured claims so convincing that even experienced adjusters missed them. I know exactly how fraud works because I helped dismantle it, over and over, in ways that held up in court. I took early retirement when Vernon was diagnosed. 3 years as his full-time caregiver, watching the man I'd loved for 31 years get smaller, and then quieter, and then gone. On a Saturday night in October that I still can't think about directly, without having to set whatever I'm holding down first. But I never forgot what I'd learned. That instinct, the one that says something is being constructed around you, doesn't go away just because you leave the job. It just waits. My daughter Rebecca is 38. She married Harlan 4 years ago at a venue that cost more than our first car. He was charming the way things are charming when they're designed to be. Easy smile, good manners, a talent for making a room feel like it was waiting for him to walk in. The first Christmas he came to dinner, I caught him photographing the certificates on my hallway wall with his phone. Commendations, years of service plaques, the framed resolution from the state insurance commissioner's office. He put his phone away when I walked back into the room. I didn't say anything. I put it in a file I keep in the back of my mind. That habit started at Meridian and never left. Things shifted last September. Rebecca began calling more often, but not to talk the way we'd always talked. She asked whether I'd updated my will since Vernon passed, whether I was thinking about selling the house, whether managing all the finances on my own was getting to be too much. Harlan came to Sunday dinner alone one evening in November, brought a store-bought sweet potato pie with the price sticker still on the bottom, and spent 40 minutes explaining how he'd set up an account management system for his own elderly mother that took all the stress off her shoulders. He could do the same for me, he said, anytime. That's very thoughtful, I told him. I poured him more tea. That night I called my friend Dorinda, who has known me since 7th grade and has never in 52 years believed I needed anyone to manage anything for me. He's circling, she said. He is, I agreed. What are you going to do? Document and wait. I photographed every financial statement I owned and emailed copies to a secure account I've maintained since my Meridian years. I copied every property deed, every account record, every document with my name on it, sealed the copies in an envelope, and mailed them to Dorinda with instructions not to open it unless I called and asked her to. Then I waited. The call came in March. The word leukemia, a specialist in Buckhead, a surgical window closing by Friday, $95,000. I want to be honest with you about what happened next, because I think people expect me to say I knew instantly. I didn't. When it's your grandchild, when it's Cody, who is 7 years old and calls me Graham Thelma and draws dinosaurs he puts in the mail because he says email is for boring people. When it's him, every trained instinct I have goes quiet. The grandmother takes over completely. I drove to the bank and wired the money before noon, and drove home feeling like I'd done the only decent thing possible. 2 days later, on Thursday afternoon, I stopped at Oak Grove Park on my way home from the pharmacy. I stop there sometimes when I'm having a hard week. I like to watch the children on the climbing structure. It steadies me. Cody was there. He was running, not walking, not resting, from the slide to the monkey bars to the water fountain and back, yelling at a friend about whose turn it was to go down first. His cheeks were red. He looked like every healthy 7-year-old boy I'd ever seen in 30 years of school. I sat in my car. I watched him for a long time. Then I drove home, sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and started a new document. At the top, I typed one word: timeline. Underneath it, March. Thelma Briscoe, case file. Old habits. I called Rebecca that evening and asked how Cody was feeling after his latest appointment. She said he was tired, resting. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. She thanked again for being such an incredible mother. She cried a little. I said I was glad. I said I was praying for him. I said goodnight and hung up and opened my spiral notebook, the one I keep in the garden shed under the potting soil. The next morning I called Shelby Ames, an attorney I'd worked with on 3 cases at Meridian, now in private practice in Marietta. I told her what had happened. I told her what I'd seen at the park. "How long have you been keeping records?" she asked. "Since September." There was a pause. "Send me everything." She called back the following morning. The wire transfer had gone to a joint personal account in Rebecca and Harlan's names, not to any medical facility, not to any specialist, not to anything resembling a hospital or a billing service. "I know," I said. "Do you want to file a police report?" "Give me 2 weeks first." In those 2 weeks, I did what I'd done for 18 years. I pulled public records. I ran searches on Harlan's full name, Harlan Goss, which I had committed to memory from the wedding announcement the same way I memorize every name that passes through my hands. What I found made me sit very still at my desk for a full minute before I moved again. 4 years before he married my daughter, Harlan Goss had been the subject of a civil lawsuit in Cobb County. An elderly woman named Olive Stanton, 71 at the time, had sued him for $60,000. Money she'd wired to him based on a fabricated family emergency. The suit was settled out of court. No criminal charges, no record most people would ever find. But I found it. I drove to Marietta on a Wednesday afternoon. Olive Stanton still lived in the same house she'd had for 40 years, with a front porch swing and hydrangeas she'd planted herself. She was 75 now. Her hands shook slightly when she poured the coffee. Her eyes didn't. "He told me my great-nephew had been in a car accident," she said. She looked at her kitchen table. I didn't even pause. I just wired the money. I felt like such a fool afterward, for years. "You weren't a fool," I said. "He was practiced. This is what he does." I asked if she'd be willing to provide a formal statement. She said yes before I finished the sentence. I called Shelby from the car in Olive's driveway. "File the police report," I told her, "and contact the financial crimes unit." That evening, Rebecca and Harlan showed up at my front door without calling first. I don't know exactly what triggered it. Maybe the bank had flagged something. Maybe Harlan had checked the account and seen questions forming. But they stood on my porch together. Rebecca's face caught somewhere between guilt and fear. Harlan's face arranged into the expression he uses when he needs to appear reasonable. I let them in. We sat in the living room. Harlan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He told me there had been a miscommunication, a transfer to the wrong account. He was sorting it out. By Monday, everything would be directed to the correct facility. "Cody doesn't have leukemia," I said. The room went quiet. "I saw him at the park Thursday afternoon. He was running. He looked fine." Rebecca's eyes moved to Harlan's. Something passed between them, fast and practiced, the way it does with people who have rehearsed being caught. "Mama, you're grieving," Rebecca said. "You're under so much stress since Daddy passed. I'm worried about your judgment." "My judgment is fine, Rebecca." Harlan's voice dropped. The warmth went out of it completely, the way warmth goes when it was never real to begin with. "Thelma, think carefully about what you're suggesting. You're a 64-year-old woman living alone. If you start making calls to banks and attorneys, people will start asking whether you're actually capable of handling your own affairs. Rebecca is your only family. You want to do this to your daughter?" I had sat across from men like Harlan Goss for 18 years, men who looked at an older woman and did the math. She's alone, she's soft, she's scared, she'll back down. Get out of my house, I said, both of you. Thelma. You have 5 seconds. They left. Harlan's voice hard and clipped, Rebecca's face tear-streaked and unreadable. I stood at my window and watched their headlights disappear down my street, and then I went to my kitchen and sat down and let my hands shake for exactly as long as they needed to. Then I called Dorinda. She came over with wine and a lasagna she'd made that morning, which is the kind of friend she has always been. You holding up? She asked. No, I said, but I'm clear about what needs to happen. Detective Anita Mora from the Fulton County Financial Crimes Unit came to my house 5 days later. 40 years old, precise handwriting, a way of listening that reminded me of the best investigators I'd ever worked alongside. She went through everything I'd assembled, the timeline, the transfer records, Olive Stanton's case, the screenshots, the notebook from the garden shed. She read without interrupting. When she finished, she looked up. Mrs. Briscoe, this is one of the most organized victim files I've received in 11 years on this unit. I used to build cases for a living, I said. Detective Mora smiled. I can tell. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Within 6 weeks, the Financial Crimes Unit had identified 2 additional victims beyond Olive and me. Both women over 65, both contacted with fabricated family emergencies, neither of whom had reported it because they'd been too ashamed. With 4 victims and a documented pattern stretching back more than a decade, the picture became impossible to argue around. Harlan Goss was arrested on a Friday morning in May. Rebecca called me from outside the police station. The crying this time was different from the phone call in March. That one had been a performance. This one wasn't. This was the sound of a woman who had been inside something she'd told herself she didn't fully understand, and was only now understanding it completely. Mama, she said, I didn't know about the other women, I swear. I believed her. That's the part that doesn't fit neatly into anything. I believed that Harlan had drawn my daughter into his world the way people like him do. One small step at a time, each step logical seeming, each one just slightly too far from the last to object to without creating a confrontation, until she was somewhere she'd never meant to be. But she had looked me in the eye and told me my grandson was dying. She had made that call. She had let me go to the bank. I believe you didn't know everything, I said. But you still made the call, Rebecca. Silence on the line. You're going to cooperate with the investigation. Fully. Every detail. I know. And when this is over, if we're going to have any relationship at all, it's going to have to be built on something different than what we had. Do you understand what I mean? Yes, Mama. I didn't sleep well that night. I lay in Vernon's side of the bed, which I've been sleeping on since he passed because his side gets more morning light, and I thought about Rebecca at 10 years old learning to French braid her hair in the bathroom mirror, asking me to check it, undoing it, and starting over 4 times until it was right. I thought about her at 17, sitting on the edge of my bed at 2 in the morning after a heartbreak she didn't want to talk about, just needing to be close. I thought about Vernon and what he would have said. I think he would have said, loving someone and holding them accountable are not opposites. You can do both at the same time. In fact, one without the other is not really love. It's just comfort wearing love's face. The trial came the following spring. Harlan pled not guilty and lasted 4 days of testimony before the evidence. 4 victims, 12 years of pattern, documentation that left no room to maneuver, became too heavy to hold up against. The jury deliberated 9 hours and came back with guilty on all counts. 7 years, full restitution to all 4 victims. Rebecca testified for the prosecution. She did it completely, without hedging or softening. The prosecutor told me afterward that Rebecca's testimony was the most damaging piece the jury heard. More damaging than my documentation. More damaging than anything. Because it came from the person who'd been closest to him, who'd watched him plan, who'd understood more than she'd admitted to herself. Olive Stanton sat 2 rows behind me when the verdict came in. When the judge read the sentence, she reached forward and placed her hand briefly on my shoulder. I covered it with mine. I got most of my money back. Some of what Harlan had taken from the other women was gone past recovery, but most of it came back. Enough. Cody came to see me the Saturday after the trial ended. He's been living with Rebecca's college friend while things were being sorted. and he'd been told only that some grown-up problems had been worked out. He was 7 years old and had no understanding of what any of it meant. He brought me a drawing of a Tyrannosaurus Rex wearing a crown, which he said was for me because I was the queen of being smart. It's been on my refrigerator for 8 months. I don't plan to take it down. Things with Rebecca are not easy. I won't tell you they are. There's a distance between us that wasn't there before. Not a cold silence. More like a careful awareness of what silence could hold if we stopped paying attention. We talk once a week. She's in therapy. She's working. She's learning, I think, what it actually means to make choices that belong to her and not to whoever she's standing next to. Last month, she came to help me winterize Vernon's garden. We worked 3 hours without saying much. At some point, she stopped with the pruning shears in her hand and looked at the rose bushes and said, "I'm sorry, Mama, for all of it. I'm still figuring out how to say it in a way that's worth anything." I handed her the trowel. "You say it right by doing it differently," I told her. "That's the only version that counts." She nodded. She didn't explain or argue or ask if I believed her. She just took the trowel and went back to work. That's new. I'll take new. Dorinda came over that evening, and we sat on the back porch while the sky went dark over Decatur, the way we've been sitting on each other's porches since we were 12 years old. She asked if I had any regrets. I thought about it the way you think about things when someone who has known you your whole life is asking. Honestly, without the version you'd tell a stranger. Not about pressing charges, I said. Not about any of the investigation. Not about a minute of it. What then? I regret waiting as long as I did to trust what I already knew. When Harlan came to dinner and photographed my certificates, when Rebecca started asking about the house, I felt it the same way I always felt when a case was beginning to take shape. I looked out at the rose bushes, cut back and mulched for winter. I just told myself it was different because it was family. Dorinda was quiet for a moment. "It is different because it's family," she said. "That's exactly why it's harder to see." I know that now. Olive Stanton and I have had lunch 4 times since the trial. She makes sweet potato pie from scratch, the real kind, and she has a porch swing she's been meaning to repaint for 3 years. She told me she spent 4 years after Harlan's civil case feeling like a fool, like she should have seen it coming, like the shame of being deceived was somehow her fault. She'd never told anyone. She'd just carried it. "You shouldn't have had to carry it alone," I told her the first time we talked, really talked. "Neither should you," she said. "Neither of us should have." That's the thing about the way people like Harlan Goss operate. They know that shame is the quietest jail there is, and they count on their victims to lock themselves inside it and never say a word. They count on women like Olive and me to believe that being deceived means we were foolish, instead of understanding that we were targeted because we were loving. Because we would wire $95,000 for a grandchild without a second's hesitation. Because that is not a weakness. That is the best of what we are. Vernon used to say the most dangerous thing a person could be was underestimated. He said it made other people careless. He said it was the best kind of advantage, if you knew how to use it. I am 64 years old. I tend Vernon's roses. I go to Wednesday Bible study. I drink coffee at my kitchen table on Sunday mornings, and read the news and watched the light come through the back window, the way it has every morning since Vernon built this house and put the east window exactly there so I'd have good light. I have a garden shed with a spiral notebook under the potting soil. And I know exactly who I am.